Hey guys, welcome back to the Spiritually Fit Podcast. My name's Connor. I'm your host with Drew Hester, our producer, and pastor extraordinaire, Joe Decrion of the North America campus.
That's right.
Yep.
You always leave me out. I don't get a quib or a title or
Yeah, dude, you're the producer and you get to go visit
Director of Operations.
Yeah, you get to go to the Aloha campus with Spencer.
It's true.
Yeah, we're going to put Adam and Corbin, though, in the Middle East. I hear it's a safe place for Christians. Anyway,
Oh, man, that's right.
I think Corbin gets Sudan. No, I'm kidding. Well, guys, good to have you back. Your week's going well?
Yeah, it's going really well because I'm with you guys.
This is like episode number 8 that we've recorded nonstop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely been 8. It feels like 8.
Feels like 8 episodes we've knocked out.
You know what's funny? We're
doing this for the fans.
You know, Peter Pittman brought this up, and I brought this up to you guys the other day. Like, as guys, we go through cycles where it's like, you know, when you're like a young little boy, like Caden's age, 4 or 5, you're like, oh, no girls around me. But then like from like 12 up, like to 25, you're like, oh man, let's have some girls around.
We're the
here.
babes.
Yeah, but then after you're married, you're like, man, I hope there's no girls there. You know, it's like such an ebb and
Dudes only, no dames.
Yeah, man. Like we got to play spike ball the other night with only guys, just a bunch of guys at the pool. You know, shirtless at the pool.
At least we think they're guys.
they're all members at the church.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Man.
They all know who they are, so I'm just teasing them.
Yeah. We all know who you are. We have another video for you guys. It'll be a good segue into the topic.
Is it serious or non-serious?
They're all serious, Joe.
Okay.
We take it serious around here. All right, we're ready.
I love.
Let me ask you guys something this morning. Do you know why thousands of people left the church that I lead? To be totally clear, it's not my fault. They left because I wanted my church to be integrated. And I wanted to be a celebrity low-key. And I started saying things that they told me I couldn't say. People in the congregation were saying things like, Pastor, half of your staff has never met you. Pastor, you're ignoring your community. Pastor, why do you always fly first class? Blah, blah, blah. They weren't integrated, see? They couldn't see the vision. So I left Seattle where I planted my church, sold all the buildings, and I moved to a place where I could be integrated. Los Angeles, California. I laid off half of my staff because they weren't integrated. I made them sign NDAs because they weren't integrated. I am the center of attention at my church, and if you don't like that, you're not integrated.
Did you feel conviction about any of that, Joe?
No.
Well, we've brought you to this meeting because we'd like to address a few things.
Drew and I were sitting watching that video going, this is something that would
Got
be
to
good
show
for
this
him
to
to hear.
Joe.
It's like
Joe,
whenever
you should be able to relate to this video.
yeah, it's kind of like that gross feeling you get whenever you hear a sermon that's convicting. You're like, so-and-so needed to hear that.
The guy next to me needed to hear that.
Ransom came up to me. Ransom, if you're listening, shout out to you. But yeah, I remember I shared that story and where like I shared that exact illustration in the sermon, and he came up to me. He's like, Pastor Joe, great sermon. Gabriel really needed to hear this sermon.
And Gabriel, if you're listening to this, that was true. You needed to hear that sermon. No, I'm kidding. Our topic today is actually dealing more with church, like structure, membership. We're kind of just talking about church.
The church.
Today.
Love the church.
You know? And I guess the first question is, what made you want to start a church?
Man, curveball.
Got him.
Got me.
That was loud.
I love teaching the Bible. I think you said on the previous episode they were like, "All right, well now that you're done with the mini sermon," which when I taught high school Bible at LCA, my students, for better or worse, they would say that like my lectures were more like mini sermons. But I love teaching the Bible, but I also love spending time with people. Diana says it's probably like maybe it's just because I was an only child for the better part of my life and I lived more in a rural Alaska area. And so I just like being around people. I didn't like live in like a typical cookie cutter neighborhood where you had, the kids in the neighborhood riding bikes or playing. I didn't have that. So I love community and I love teaching the Bible. And I think I struggled. We live in a city here in Lynchburg where there are quite a few different options as far as churches.
It was like 800, I think, in the...
There's a lot.
Lynchburg.
I think that the challenge for me was I'd go to a church and the pastor would give really good content, but it would be like kind of boring how he'd deliver it. Or he'd have an amazing delivery and he was really easy to listen to, but we really wouldn't talk about the Bible. And I was like, can't we like marry the two together? And I think the other thing was, I don't know how many churches I had gone to in Lynchburg. I'll tell you this. I don't think I ever had one where someone invited me to hang out after service. I don't think I ever had one where if I went by myself, someone was like, oh, are you here alone? Oh, dude, come sit with me and Drew. Come sit with me and Connor. Like, I never, ever have experienced that. And I think that's really like sad and unfortunate. You today almost have to claw your way in, and be on like a waiting list that basically like, you want community? Okay, there's 12 to 18 month waiting list at this local church to get like to be in. And I'm like, why? Like, why does it have to be so hard to like be in? And I realized for those reasons, I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's room for one more local church that kind of focuses on some different things.
I just remember my first experience at LCC. Not that you asked, but I'm going to say it anyway.
I didn't ask.
Well, we got invited by the Pittmans, and they were like, do you want to go to dinner after church? And we were like, you guys do that? You want to hang out after church? Like, oh, okay. Yeah, we'll go. And we did. It was really nice. It's like, oh, somebody actually cares.
Yeah. Shout out to Peter and Havala.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for inviting the Hesters.
Yeah.
People need that. Like, you were made for that. And unfortunately, like, it's so sad they don't get that so often. And obviously, the larger the church, the more challenging it is to be that. We're a smaller church, but as we grow, that will be a challenge that we'll have to adapt to.
Yeah, sure. Like, I'm even thinking of, we try to welcome visitors when they come in, but if you're a church of 1,000 people, you might not know it. It's almost impossible to know and remember every face. So you might not know whether the person that's walking in the door is a visitor or not. Like,
and
there are challenges.
Sure. And one of the ways we adapt to that, like the reason I stand outside the door with Spencer and the interns, shout out interns, is because I think it's really important. 1 Timothy 3 talks about pastors being able to teach, but the one aspect of pastors that like gets like kind of like glossed over is being hospitable.
Yeah.
Elders being hospitable. So like I'm out there so that I can say hi to everyone, but I'm out there because we're actually memorizing people's names as they walk in, so that I have every single person's name memorized. I don't know how many names I can memorize. Probably more than I think I can, but that's what we do. Spencer and I, and like we stand outside because they're like, oh, well, we have the greeting team. Like, so like no one else can greet. I'm like, anybody, if you have the gift of hospitality, please come outside and say hi to people. Because I think it's vitally important. People remember that sometimes more than like a really good sermon.
So, you know, this kind of leads into this is actually a great segue. You know, how should we, structure our church as far as like the leadership, right? Some churches do elder led. Mm-hmm. Some do, elder ruled, and then congregation led, right? Lynchburg City Church, we kind of do a mixture, I believe, right?
We're really elder led. So the difference is congregational, and for our viewers out there in radio land, the tens and tens of you, I'll break this down because I don't want to assume that you guys understand the different structures, but churches will do one of those three things that Connor just mentioned. Congregational is where people vote on everything. Mm-hmm. What time are we meeting? We're taking a vote. What movie are we watching tonight? We're taking a vote. What songs are we singing? We're taking a vote. What color of the carpet? We're taking a vote. And it is just a hot mess. I do not recommend congregational led. Elder ruled is kind of the opposite extreme. You pull really hard the opposite way, in which the elders make decisions for everything. Elder led, so the difference between elder ruled, the elders are making the decisions. Elder led is really more the elders are making recommendations, in which normally the congregation, if they trust them, which hopefully they do, the vote's real easy. So elder led is different in that, in which they make the recommendations, and then they also handle a lot of the things, day-to-day operations. So, and the reason is, you say, well, why would you do that? So I don't have to drag my normal members into unnecessary meetings, because as an Army officer, nobody understands and hates unnecessary meetings more than me. meetings just to have meetings. So I want people free so they can be doing the work of the ministry, building up the saints, making disciples, evangelizing their neighbors, not coming and sitting in a meeting that really is dealing with a topic that the elders could probably handle and we don't need input. On big things like the budget or choosing a new pastor, yeah, I'm going to invite the congregation to participate in that and we'll give a recommendation.
Yeah.
In the elder-led model, there's some accountability between the congregation and the elders, right? Like there's
Yeah.
a level of accountability which
There is.
ties it all together.
I'd like to think so.
So elders, though, how are they chosen? Right? Is it all chosen by the pastor, or is it congregation chosen?
So at Lynchburg City Church, or are you just talking about like the formatting in general?
Both. Let's do both. Let's start with like the formatting, and then do what you do.
So a lot of churches will do like and once again, you've got elders who serve and they call them lay elders. So like at LCC, this would be people not me and Spencer who are on the leadership team. And we call it a leadership team. It's also known as an elder team, just as self-descriptive. But those lay elders those guys can be selected by the team itself. I believe. I feel like I need to have like Spencer double check the bylaws, but yeah, that's how it works. Now it is different. I know for a fact when it comes to choosing a pastor, that's something that we have to vote on because we did that last year for Spencer.
Right.
And they have to get like, I think 90% of the vote, which 90% in my opinion is too low. It should be like 99, 100%.
Pretty sure it was 100%.
Spencer got 100%, right? Because it's like, why wouldn't you?
For now, Spencer. For now. Just kidding.
We really love Spencer.
Yeah.
We're just kidding.
Yeah, so that's typically how it works. Once again, you've got your pastors and you have your lay elders, and they all serve, right? So it's like, what's the difference between the senior pastor and the lay elder? Like, he is a leader among equals. I think that's the verbiage that it used. A leader among equals.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I know that we've had you and Spencer now. Spencer was added to the team when again, technically?
January 1,
January 1.
2025.
Yeah. Question though, is a single pastor model biblical, or does it make more sense to have a plurality?
I think it makes more sense to have a plurality, but a solo pastor may be necessary before you can reach that ideal of a plurality.
Is it based off of size, kind of?
I don't think it is. No, I think ultimately like a plurality of elders is the kind of what you want, a plurality of leaders, not just for accountability, but to help. It's a lot of work being a pastor. But I was the guy, especially with church plants, when you start off, and LCC was a church plant. We started off in 2013. I was the guy. I didn't have anybody else to help me. And so, as far as like the ideal, you have the ideal and then you have what's necessary until you can get to the ideal.
So let's say you're going to go plant a church. How do you start developing those elders? Like, where are you getting them from? Is it just hoping that people show up and they're qualified, or are you bringing people from a previous church that you were at? Like, how are you doing that?
Dude, my reaction on my face is just thinking about how hard that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard. In answer to your question, yes. You could do it multiple different ways. Ideally, you'd have a team that relocates with you.
Like not ascending team, but a going team. Yeah.
Yes. People, yes.
I've seen that before.
Yes. I think that's the ideal way to go and do it. To have a team of people with you to get traction, to get grounded. But I also, my friend Josh Tancordo started a church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Shout out to the Steel City. It was him, his wife, and then a young girl from their sending church in Alabama. And the three of them went up there. And that was their team.
Okay. But another question, I guess, like for me, is should the pastors, right? Because in, case scenario, we have, Peter Pittman, because he's, in charge of worship at Lynchburg City Church, and we have Andrew Glover. But we also have two pastors on like our leadership team. It's really just 4 people right now. Mm-hmm. Is there like, do the pastors have more say?
As I said earlier, the senior pastor is a leader among equals. He's got 1 vote just like everybody else. Does he have more say? No. Does he have more sway? Yes.
Because he has the heartbeat of like the
I think he does,
congregation.
right? Like, and he should. He
Because
should.
he's not just a pastor; he's a shepherd. He knows the sheep.
He doesn't just preach sermons.
I don't know where I saw this. Maybe you shared this video, but I saw this video. I think it was you. You sent it to me, but it was a reel where it was a shepherd calling a sheep, and he was telling other people, "You try to
Yeah, I
call
did
the
send
sa-
that to you.
You call them the same way, and they don't respond." But,
Yeah, it
but the
literally-
sheep knew his voice,
Yeah.
like because the shepherd had spent time with them, and like
They
so-
only ran to hit the shepherd's
Yeah.
voice.
And that's true, right? And that's of course John 10. That's the picture of Jesus as the good shepherd. Once again, he doesn't have more say, but he has more sway. He's going to have more influence.
Yeah.
And in that case, maybe you could argue he has more say, but not in the sense that he has more votes. He has one vote. But remember, like pastors sometimes, pastors who only focus on preaching are going to drop the ball. You've got to know the troops. You've got that opening scene in Gladiator 1 when Russell Crowe arrives on scene. Notice the reaction of like the Roman soldiers versus when Joaquin Phoenix, Commodore, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor's son, when he arrives, the soldiers could give a rat's behind, like because he's not living life with them. He's off, in the luxury penthouse where Russell Crowe's character Maximus Aurelius, he's living life with the troops. He knows the troops. He spends time with the troops, and that really gets to that aspect of hospitality, and it also gets to that aspect of shepherding. You can't just be the pastor who only preaches lights out sermons. You've also got to be the pastor who shepherds his flock, who knows his sheep. And furthermore, like if you're at a church and you don't know your pastor, why is that? It could be his fault, but it also could be your fault. Like your pastor, and this is really important. I want to bring up, I love bringing up Bible as much as we possibly can, but it says, Hebrews 13:17, obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls. That's the shepherding aspect, as those who will have to give an account. They have to give an account for if they loved you well. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. And a lot of people are like, well, how do I obey and submit to my leaders if I don't even know who they are?
With that, is there a different level of accountability that's described in Scripture for pastors because of that responsibility that they have?
Yes. James 3:1, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Now, it's not specifically speaking of pastors here, but given the fact that, according to 1 Timothy chapter 3, that pastors, elders are supposed to be able to have the ability to teach and preach.
Right.
Yeah, ultimately, like we're going to be held with greater strictness. And we go back to the passage in Hebrews, that I just quoted, right? We have to give an account. Hebrews 13:17. We are supposed to watch over the souls of our sheep, and we have to give an account. We have to give an account. Who do we give an account to? We give an account to God. So yes.
You started out you said the reason why you started Lynchburg City Church is because you loved teaching, but you also loved the people. And I think that's kind of the important part. Like, what would you say to someone who's like, I want to go to seminary because I want to teach, but doesn't have a heart for the people?
You will lose your mind because people are messy and people will hurt you a lot.
You preached on that recently.
Yeah.
I
It's a
did
good
preach
sermon.
on that recently. Like doing ministry.
We should submit the link for that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can put that sermon in. That's the John 5:1-18 sermon.
That's a really good one for this question.
A lot of people have the gift of teaching, but you've got it. Like if you don't like people or people annoy you, it'll be magnified 10x. And some people you can't do it, man. That's what it's like, okay, go be a professor or go be a lay teacher. You've really got to love people, enjoy people, and spend time with people. And even then, they will bug the heck out of you, and they will annoy you. And think about Moses. Think about Moses and the people complaining about stupid little stuff. Okay, that's a picture of what being a pastor is like sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another part of the church that needs to get brought up, I think, is deacons, right? So I guess a good question for many people is, what's the difference between a deacon and an elder?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, once again, we get the qualifications for both deacons and elders in 1 Timothy chapter 3. First the elders, then the deacons. The word deacon
Means helper, right?
Yeah, it does mean helper. And so these are people who are there really in this supporting role for the elders. And we kind of see this in the book of Acts when they basically are just so overwhelmed with the day-to-day operations of the early church. And the apostles are like, time out, we need help. We need to get people, like, because they're like, listen, it's not that we can't take out the trash and wait on tables and scrub them down, but like we've got so many other things going on. We need to have some other people who are in leadership positions who can be tasked out for these other roles. What is that, Acts 6 or 7? Yeah. So that's what they are. They're people, men and women, deacons and deaconesses, who are in positions of leadership role, but their main goal is in a supportive role. Just like when we think about the army, oftentimes we're like, oh, you go out and the army's designed to kill people. Yes, but only about like 10% of the people are actually doing the killing. The other 90% of them are actually supporting the combat arms jobs, including like myself. I'm a chaplain and you're going to be an army doctor. Like we're in those supportive roles.
Yeah, and there's a lot of guys and girls at Lynchburg City Church who are really good deacons, like Josh Rains, for example.
Dude, I love that guy.
Always behind the scenes, always helping. You know,
he's been there for almost longer than anybody else. And I mean, that guy is such a workhorse, and just you want to have people that are burden lifters. At every church, you'll have people who add burdens and then people who lift burdens. And he's a guy who, as long as I've known him, he's been a burden lifter.
Yeah, same. Drew does that too. I mean, with a lot of the stuff that he does. I mean, 100%. Drew and Josh are, you know, such burden lifters that I find myself needing to be more of a burden to make up for it. So I go out of my way personally.
Yeah,
just to cause strife.
We noticed.
I go out of my way just to cause problems for Spencer.
It's like, I think Joe's having kind of a slow week.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do some. I'm gonna go get in trouble with the law or something. So we would kind of rate it if we had to rank people. You would almost put like pastors, kind of because they're in that natural leadership position, then elders, and then deacons.
Well, remember, pastors are elders,
but they have that extra role of shepherding.
I wouldn't say an extra role. I would just say typically the way we think of it is you have lay elders who are in volunteer roles. It's not their full-time job, but you know, if lay elders could also be people who guest preach and do things like that. They should be helping. They should remember the qualifications of the elder. It doesn't stop just because you're a lay elder. Like those are things you should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in the reality of the structure, you need a singular person who's casting vision. Because if you have 5 people casting vision, there's going to be lines going all different directions.
Yes.
You need someone helping navigate, drive. Only one person can drive the ship.
Correct. Yes, and that's where, the leadership team, the elders, they're all officers.
Yeah.
Let's borrow some military metaphors. They're all officers, but they're really like staff officers serving on the commanding general staff.
Yeah, it's kind of like how Hegseth is like the Secretary of Defense. Like he's keeping like the vision, but then he has his 4-star generals.
He's the Sec Def. Hegseth is the Sec Def, and then he's got his chiefs of staff.
Yeah.
And once again, where we get this all from Moses. Remember, with this Moses' father-in-law is like, dude, you got way too much on your plate. You need to have effectively like other commanding officers that can handle the situations for you.
Yeah, Deuteronomy is literally about how to like set up a government, isn't it? And like how to set up a church. What were you gonna say?
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah,
it's a little bit rare, but I do that occasionally.
Okay, so what do we do in the situation at Lynchburg City Church, right? Where let's say it's 2 and 2. We have an exact equal split. What do you do whenever there's like one of those big items like you were talking about, or like maybe some of those smaller items, right? That, you know, let's say that like 2 of you are on one side and 2 of you are on the other side. What do you do?
You're talking about like the leadership team. Like
because it's a 50-50.
If a leadership team or an elder team has the equal amount of people and you have a split decision, you try to work it out, right? So I remember Piper, before, like a year or two before he retired, they had like 32 people on their leadership team, 32 elders. And there was an issue that came up. I had to do with would they accept people who crossed over from the Presbyterian world into the Baptist world? Would they accept their baptism? So, or would they not accept it? And
because of paedobaptism.
Long story short, like 27 of the 33 were in agreement. I mean, that's kind of a super majority. But Piper, as the lead pastor, was like, no, I want everyone to buy into this. And that's kind of what, like, I think, like, the idea of, like, the leader and the visionary does. You want to get everyone, if possible, to buy into it. And even though they had, like, a super majority, and at that point, he was like, I don't think we should push this through. We've got 5 good brothers here that are taking issue with this, that this is really bothering their conscience. And he's like, maybe we can revisit it, but I don't want to push it through. And so there's wisdom, I think, certainly in certain situations, to know kind of like when to hold them and when to fold them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question would be, what do we do? How do we hold each of the elders spiritually and also, just morally accountable, right? I guess morally is not the best way of putting it, but let's say that one of them is Andrew Glover did not say this, but let's say that Andrew Glover, Andrew Glover does not believe this, want to go ahead and pretense this, right? But let's say Andrew Glover's like, I believe in universalism. Lynchburg City Church, we clearly do not believe in universalism, and neither does Andrew. But what would you do in that situation where one of the core 4 elders has this very conflicting belief with the church?
In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 22, it says, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands, nor take part in the sins of others. Keep yourselves pure. Don't be hasty in the laying on of hands. That's what he says. And in the context, you read earlier in chapter 5, he's speaking of elders. He's effectively saying, don't battlefield promote people into leadership positions prematurely. So, in other words, before that person ever makes their way into a seat on the leadership team, on the elder team, we're going to vet them very, very carefully. So number one, if they're not a member, we're not even having a conversation about this.
Yeah, of course. And we'll go into membership later.
Yeah, we're not having a conversation. And number two, I would say that the importance of being like-minded isn't just, however much it is for being a member, we need to at least agree on these things. It increases even more for elders. In fact, at Piper's church that he was at, they actually had a statement of faith for the members, and they had like a more exhaustive and comprehensive statement of faith for the elders, for the leaders.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And that's probably good.
Right. And so once again, I'm not answering your question of like in a reaction way, but really more of a prescriptive way to avoid that situation entirely.
Well, let's say that they developed that belief.
What was the original belief?
It was universalism. I had to pick something that's just outlandish.
Yeah.
You can't. I'd be like, you understand, Andrew, that is, even if you truly believe in your heart of hearts that is true, you are no longer, you can no longer
It's a
like
disqualification.
Yeah,
It would be an
can't.
automatic like kick him off.
I don't, for something that egregious, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because
Andrew does not believe this, just so we're clear.
Yeah, we're
But,
coming up with hypotheticals to
Yeah,
explain how it would work.
that's so problematic.
Yeah.
He's like, I would say he's gone off the rails. Like if he thinks that.
Yeah.
It might not be a belief. It could be an action or a sin too that would
Because now,
disqualify
guess
you.
what?
Yeah.
Like he's telling the guys in his prayer pot, he's somebody who has influence, and now he's going to exercise that influence, and that's a problem because
Yeah.
that influence goes against like the influence myself as really like one of the main representatives of the church that I'm trying to exercise.
Okay, so let's flip the scenario. Joe, you go off the rails. Do the elders at the church have the ability to say, Joe, you're done?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and they need to.
They need to. You talked
They
about
need
that
to.
in one of your sermons,
Listen,
like keeping accountability.
yeah, like and I always try to be honest, like I'm just trying to call balls and strikes, if Piper went off the rails, I'd be like, yeah, he went off the rails here. I used to love Beth Moore, and she went off the rails. If you don't know who Beth Moore is, that's fine. If you do know, but you're not sure like how she went off the rails, that could be an entire podcast. But I basically I have no problem telling somebody who I really like they've gone off the rails, and I hope you tell me too if I've lost my way. And this goes back to like one of our main memory verses at small group, Hebrews 3:12 and 13. Exhort one another every day. Joe, what are you doing, man? Like this is not like what you believe this? This is bonkers. This is bananas.
So let's not talk about a belief, though. Let's talk about an action. Let's say Man, I'm just gonna keep picking on Andrew. Whatever.
We love you, Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew, you're a great guy, man. Sorry. And Jess, if you're watching, your husband didn't do
She
this.
tells me she listens to all these episodes. Jess does. So.
Andrew, he's got thick skin. Who can take it?
Yeah. So let's say that Andrew gets pulled over for a DUI, right? Does that disqualify someone for that? And let's say that he does it more than once.
My goodness.
Just making a lot of hypotheticals. Dude.
Well, no, I'm just like
Yeah. No, I
accountability
understand, yeah.
because like obviously like there have been members in the past that like get in trouble, right, for something like that. Obviously, it would probably be a different punishment.
Like, I think we'd have to assess everything. Like, I think it would be very difficult for me to give a blanket statement here.
Yeah.
And then like something happens 8 years from now when someone pulls up this episode and they use my words against me.
Yeah.
And I think number one, you have to evaluate everything case by case.
Yeah.
Regardless of the situation. You threw in the nuance of it's repetitive. It's now it's happened like 3 times in the last 3 months. I think that in and of itself, like, I think
Sure.
that's concerning versus
We talked about this a little bit on the church discipline episode. There's this
Okay.
idea of like we're approaching it with love. The goal is always restoration.
Because, like the one example, and I won't use Andrew for this example, but the example I have seen at large churches is, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, like affairs among elders and people in the church, right? We've heard of that and it kind of gets brushed under the rug, right? And they're still in leadership, right? Like that one is like the most common
It
one.
is.
That's the most common one.
It is.
And like I've heard people like make the case that they were repentive or that they stopped it. But should they still be in that?
I think you have to be on academic probation for a certain period of time.
Recently, was it Matt Chandler who kind of went through this himself as
Chandler-
the pastor?
He didn't sleep with the woman.
Yeah, but
He was messaging a woman, and then he said that he got
Right.
too familiar. Like
Yeah,
they were not perverted in any way.
But he held himself to it. Maybe if that was just
That was cool
Maybe
that
if
he
that was
actually
just a
did it.
member of the church, no one would have known about it. But he said, "Okay, I'm in leadership. I want to be transparent."
That's
Like
a good
I-
thing to do.
Like I feel like that's when you're in leadership. It's biblical. There's a different level of accountability that we have to have because of that. You're setting the example, so there's more of a
is.
public. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. There's public discipline for
You're in a
that because
fishbowl.
yeah,
And you're in a fishbowl. People are going to see what you're doing. And let's just be real. Like, if there is an issue that's going to happen, it's going to be with... If there's a problem that happens with the leaders at Lynchburg City Church, it's probably going to be something that has to do with another woman.
yeah, it's.
Let's just be real. Like, that
I was trying to
chances
avoid
are,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not like I'm trying to give a prophetic word, but just say, I know what we're susceptible to.
yeah. We're all dudes. We get that.
Yeah, like, and I think, and that brings up a great question, going back to like, okay, well, let's say I'm at a local church, because this is a question that often we get at least once a year. You talk about like, it's a problem if I go to a church, I don't know who my pastor is, and he doesn't know who I am. But what if there is too great a level of familiarity, or what does the balance look like?
Oh, yeah.
And so I try to make myself the boots on the ground, model myself, gladiator, Maximus. I want to be the guy that's boots on the ground. I know that's how you do good ministry. That's the shepherding. But how does that really relate to when it comes to girls? Can girls text their pastor? Can girls call their pastor? And this is always something that comes up.
Yeah, because Billy Graham, he was very famed for, like if a girl would come knock on
Never
his...
meeting alone. Yeah, the Billy Graham rule.
Yeah, it was Billy Graham. That's right. And he like wouldn't open the door, and like some people kind of criticized him for that, for being sexist. And he was like, it's not just for me, but it's for that girl. So that way, like people don't perceive something about her, which I thought was really cool.
And so I'm sure someone would say, okay, well then what is appropriate? What is appropriate?
Yeah, it's tough.
And so what I typically say is you should be able to text your pastor to have that level of trust. Like, I can text him. But number one, if you're texting him, you're not saying, hey, Joe, just thinking of you. How are you doing? That probably wouldn't be appropriate necessarily. Like, it's okay.
Sorry.
The cat.
My cat was recognizing itself
Yeah.
in the mirror.
So, for example, I text girls. I have text message conversations with different girls at the church. If you looked at any single text message I had with a girl at the church, okay, if it was Ellie, if it was with Rebecca, if it was with Jess Glover, they would all be professional, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
I text Jess Glover probably more frequently than most, but because of the position that she's
Yeah,
in.
she's doing things at our church
Right.
to serve. There's like,
But I don't send her a text. I'm like, hey Jess, how's your day going? Just thinking
just
about
wanna-
you.
just wanna
Hey,
chat,
I was
yeah.
I had a dream about you. I
You
was
do that,
thinking-
you
like,
do that
like,
to me. You do that.
Weirdo.
You'll be like, I dreamed of you.
My point is like, and you have to have enough self-awareness, and unfortunately a lot of pastors don't. You have to have enough self-awareness to be like, that's the line, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to keep it professional. I'm not saying as a pastor you can't. You always have to be serious. You're not allowed to ever like joke. But I think like especially in communication, like you have to be very, very, very careful on how you handle yourself. So like, yes, as a girl, you should be able to reach out to your pastor and ask them questions, but the questions should have a point. And they should be professional, not personal when it comes to the pastor. They can be personal about yourself. Like you can ask questions, and that's the thing. Like
I'm struggling with this, Joe.
struggling with this.
Please help me.
yes, I'd be like, okay, your prayer pod leader is Gretchen. I'm like, have you talked to Gretchen about this? Yes, I have. And she said I should talk to you. I'm like, all right, you know what? Why don't we, because of this conversation, after small group, you, me, and Gretchen, come talk to me afterwards. And let's have a follow-up.
Can you explain what prayer pods are?
Yeah.
Just for clarification.
Yeah. So what we do, prayer pods are discipleship groups, which are designed with a focus of prayer and sharing needs in which we can pray for one another. And they meet weekly at our church. So we have small group on Tuesday nights at our church, which in many ways functions almost as a midweek service because we sing and we recite scripture.
I love it.
And we read scripture and we pray for all of our unsaved family members on this giant prayer board. And then we do a Bible study and we talk about the sermon and people can ask questions and I'm just going to respond like on the go. Yeah. And then the last half of it, we break up. There might be 60 or 70 of us. So it's called small group, which is somewhat misleading, but we break up in the last 45 minutes or an hour. 5 or 6 girls might be in Gretchen's prayer pod, and she's the prayer pod leader. And those 6 or 7 girls are in the same group for like 9 months. And so every week they're getting to know each other. Every week they're learning about the good things and the bad things, the highs and the lows, and they're sharing and doing life with one another. That's kind of how we have it designed. And the prayer pod leaders, we call them prayer pod leaders, but they are effectively de facto deacons and deaconesses.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, guys, we have a bunch more questions that are going to come up, a lot of juicy ones, as we like to put them in the media world. Please tune in next week. We'll be going through a couple more questions on membership and church structure. Catch you next week.